and welcome to Seeing Me on the Screen. I'm your host, Hannah, and each week I am honoured to engage in meaningful conversations with an incredible lineup of guests. From disability rights advocates to artists, filmmakers to everyday heroes, our guests bring a wealth of diverse perspectives that enrich our discussions. These stories and insights are invaluable as we analyse and uncover the narratives surrounding female disability in mass media. Your voice matters. Email us at seeingmeonthescreenpod@gmail.com with any guest suggestions or topics you'd like us to delve into. Today's guest is Chanelle Moriah, an autistic advisor and advocate. She is the author of I Am Autistic, an interactive and informative guide to autism, and This is ADHD, a workbook, practical advice and interactive journaling for understanding ADHD. Let's get into the discussion. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. I just have a few lovely little questions for you. I think we might as well get started now as the amazing author and autistic advocate that you are. And I'm so honored to talk to you today. Okay, so first question for you. Could you share any personal anecdotes or stories from your own life that influenced the creation of I Am Autistic?
So I Am Autistic was actually created for myself. It was never intended to be published. I had just been diagnosed and I was looking everywhere for information. I just wanted it all kind of organized. It was a lot of processing to do. And I couldn't really find any books that just kind of summarized everything. And so I did it for myself. I made everything into a summary so that I could put it in order somewhere. And so I was a client at Autism New Zealand at the time. And one of the people that I saw took screenshots of it and sent it to Verb Wellington with my permission. And 2 hours later, I had a publisher. So it was honestly just, on my part, one big mistake that happened, but a good mistake.
Yes, it's a serendipitous mistake in that case. It's the neurodivergent vibes of being like, let me organize these things to make it as easy as possible. It is, I do relate to the aspect of everything being such a jumbled mess.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of information in the first place, let alone for people that are on the spectrum that are female identifying or AFAB. Have you experienced a lot of common misconceptions or stereotypes about autism within your own life that you've personally faced from what people have said to you? Anything like that?
Yeah, so most of them actually happened before I was diagnosed. So pre-diagnosis, I had kind of been talking to people in my life about how I think I might be autistic. And I was met with, oh, no, you're fine, you're normal, it's okay. Or, oh, but everyone's a little bit autistic.
Oh.
No, not everyone's a little
No.
And it was kind of weird because it was like, hey, I might be this thing and it might explain things for me and I'm really excited. And they go, oh, no. It's like, wait, how am I not explaining this vibe correctly? I'm happy about this. Why are you sad about it? So yeah, that kind of, it's a bad thing is one. The everyone's a little bit autistic is another one. And then when I got diagnosed, it was, oh, but you're high functioning. Again, no.
Pain.
And it doesn't make a lot of sense because these people, right, they've known that I've struggled with my mental health for years. At that time, I couldn't work. I was struggling a lot. So it's like, oh, you're doing really bad. You're not in a good place. You're really struggling. And then you go, oh, I'm autistic. And they go, oh, no, you're normal. You're fine. You're doing great. I'm like, pick one. Can't be both.
Yeah, and the same thing is just like, oh, you don't seem autistic.
Oh,
like,
you don't look autistic.
What does that mean? Like, what?
I actually wrote a whole article about being told I don't look autistic, and actually went really well. But I mean, if I do get told that in person, I would. My favorite response to it is, well, you don't look neurotypical.
Clap back, love that. No, I'm going to use that from now on. That's just going to be the default thing of being like, you don't look blank. You don't look blank either yourself, mate. Just get it. You roast them now. That's going to be great. No, I like that. And I suppose when you were going through the process of publication, it was more of like working to challenge and overcome the stereotypes through your advocacy work that you've done in your publications. Anyway, as idealistic as it is, I hope that your book continues to break down some of these like stereotypes of like trains and STEM, etc. Like, I wish that my special interests could cater towards capitalism, but they don't. So I'm just like, isn't that fun? I mean, unless I was working at like the Museum of Broadway, I really do consider my special interest to be kind of a little bit useless. Like, aside from people like, oh, kinky pieces of Wellington, I'm just like, yeah, but like, I can't afford to go. Like, I just came back from New York. Like, do you want me to go and support local theatre or not?
Yeah, my special interest currently, I mean, it's just autism, neurodivergence, and it's fortunate I've been able to turn that into a job. But yeah,
Apparently, it's a common thing as well when people go through
yes,
like the process, and it's just like they get so not like obsessed, because I don't want to call it obsessed, but like so interested, so passionate about the symptoms and neurodiversity and all that stuff. And it's just like, it's weird because on one part, it's just like the doctor may be like, oh, you clearly researched so much. I'm like, would someone have made a PowerPoint? Would a logical neurotypical person make a PowerPoint about their symptoms? Would someone
yeah,
else write a like description-esque book about it? Not sure.
yeah. I showed up to one doctor's appointment once with an 8-page document listing all of my symptoms, how long I've had them, and whether or not they line up with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. And my doctor took one look at it and she went, "Well, it's definitely the autism that made this."
Yes. No, I
Yeah,
love a
I
good
mean,
spreadsheet.
it's also kind of it's hard navigating the health system as an autistic person, right? Because well, another one of my interests are like human bio or like conditions or medicines. So I look into a lot of conditions. I read up on a lot of conditions, and because of that, I've been able to make fairly good judgments around what condition I might be experiencing. So when I go to a doctor and I say, I think I have this, it's not me overreacting and jumping to conclusions. I've spent ages looking into it, but they're not used to people like me who do that, who are anxious about it. I'm not
Yeah.
stressed. I'm just like, here's the thing I have, and here's why I think I have it. Can you please look into it? I'm not freaking out.
Yeah, it's not being a hypochondriac. It's just noticing that you're identifying with a lot of the symptoms and trying to take action to corroborate it with professional sources. It's not like some kind of thing being like, ooh, like I'm
Yeah.
I'm disabled.
But then, okay, so with that, right, because I'm really interested in human bio and medicines and whatnot, I also know a lot of very morbid facts. And that that can
Yes.
sometimes get me into trouble where I'll be like, oh, if you drink this much amount of water, you'll die. Don't ask me how I know that.
But that's great though. Wait, do you have a fun one you can share?
Well, okay, so one that I did say to people, so I do workshops or I present in workshops, and one of the workshops we were presenting in was in for the police. And I, in front of these police, well, not police officers, like police staff, I said to them, I have enough codeine at home to kill 3 to 6 people. And I was explaining that autistic people might say things that are inappropriate, but don't necessarily mean anything inappropriate. Like, I'm not going to go and kill people with my codeine, but I have enough if I wanted to.
Yeah, hypothetically you could.
Yeah.
But doesn't mean you're going to.
Yeah.
I love that. That's great. I am like that too. If people get me onto like the musical choo choo train, I'm just like, and then I'll like end up talking to them as much as people are just like, oh yes, cheery musicals. I'm just like, people die. Lots of people die. And
Yeah.
it's great. And it's done through song most of the time. And it's consistent. It's probably why I like musicals so much is because they're so consistent. But
Honestly, I don't know how I didn't get picked up sooner. Like, there was one time I went swimming at the beach and there were like salps in the water, and nobody knew what they were because we don't really see them very often. And so I was wandering around in the ocean, going to talk to random strangers about salps and how they reproduce and what they feed on and all sorts of little facts about salps.
oh my goodness. I mean, some people might find it odd, but like they're trying to conversate with me, so I'd rather give them that opportunity to speak whatever their little heart desires instead of like getting the looks of being like, I'm dying inside. You can tell by my face. Can you please stop talking? Like, I still struggle with that if people get me onto musicals and I'm just like, let me talk for the next 30 minutes about musicals. It's going to be great. And it's just such a mess when a lot of special interest related to things that are more like Harry Styles and One Direction is quite a common, obsession, infatuation, like the Beatles, that kind of thing. When it's like catered to females aren't seen as serious enough to be considered valid diagnoses or special interests or things like that. Instead, it's just trains. The only train I'd consider to be, somewhat profitable within capitalistic society is flipping Starlight Express the musical, because that's a batshit insane musical about trains written by Andrew Lloyd Webber, and they have roller skates. It's absolutely wild. See, this is my problem. This is what happens when I get onto musicals. So your book, well, both of them, and I plug for the second book. Your books and encourage interactive journaling. Can you explain how this process can help individuals with neurodivergence better to understand their own thoughts, emotions, and experiences?
So the interactive journaling side of the book was partly so that I could acknowledge the fact that I cannot speak on behalf of all autistic people. I do not, it's just not possible. We're all very different, and I can't say everything about every autistic person. So having it as interactive means that people can have a starting point from what I put there and then put their own experiences in. And I guess that was also meant for people who were not yet diagnosed, who perhaps wanted to use the book as a tool to help get a diagnosis or explain things to other people. It also means that adults in an autistic child's life can mark off things that relate to that child, and they can share that with other adults. It just kind of makes it a little bit more personalized, I think. I mean, I'm not really sure in terms of how it helps, although I think it does make it easier, because if you're thinking that you're autistic, there's so many different things you can look into and how to think about that and how to analyze it, whereas my books mean that you can just start in one place and kind of process it there if that's what you want to do.
That's so cool. And for the parents, are there, or caregivers or what have you, are there any specific strategies or exercises from your book in particular that they can incorporate into their interactions with neurodiverse people?
I think the ones that I would want people to understand the most would be the language and the way we talk and the way we socialize. Because there are a lot of implications and metaphors and whatnot in everything, literally everything. And it's so hard to get through life when you're a bit literal and not understanding things the way people are saying them. I did not realize how hard it was to communicate with people or understand what people were saying until I got diagnosed and actually thought about it and realized I was misunderstanding people, and that explains some of the interactions I've had, or people were misunderstanding me, and again explains some of the interactions I've had. So yeah, the language side of things is.
I mean, a good example of that, when you're going in for a job interview and they're like, "Why do you want this job?" and you can't say money.
I know. Oh my goodness, this is one part of my job. We do presentations for employers, but yeah, that's a big one. Why do you want this job? Tell me about yourself. What part? I can tell you my height and my eye color, and what do you want to know? Or the weaknesses. I'm like, I don't know. I'm afraid of the dark, and if I were in a war, that'd be pretty shit. But what?
So, are there any specific media portrayals of autistic characters, outright or coded autistic characters, or any storylines that you feel have been impactful or accurate in representing the experiences of individuals with autism?
I did like Chloe Hayden in Heartbreak High.
Yeah.
And I know that she helped with what her quotes are going to be. So what is that word? Her script? Yeah. I know she helped with her script. So I did like that one. Part of me kind of wonders if Luna Lovegood is autistic coded.
Surely. It may not be explicit, but I think so too. I don't know. Matilda the musical is a pretty common one as well.
Oh, yeah.
So
yeah.
Quiet hits different. That's what I'm saying. I love to mention Groundhog Day slaps. This is my problem. It'll start with one thing and I'll just be like, let's go through this person's entire discography. In your opinion, how do you think that the media industry can improve the representation of disabilities? Are there any specific changes or improvements you'd like to see in the way female disability is portrayed in movies and media?
I think there are particular disabilities where the actress or actor needs to have those differences. There's to an extent, if you break a leg and you're temporarily disabled, that's something anyone can act. But something like autism, it's kind of offensive if someone else is acting it, but probably because they're going to act it wrong, for starters. But
music.
Yeah, I think there needs to be involvement, at least to some capacity, from the disabled community if you're going to have disabled representation. You can't just make guesses on stereotypes.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
all the drama that's coming out with music from its initial screenings and now Sia coming out as being on the spectrum, I'm like, does that take away from the harm that the movie's caused with like the like visible restraint scenes and stuff like that? It's a very awkward situation because
Yeah.
being an author and like having authority over your films and the way that they're presented, in hindsight, being a neurotypical person, but now being late diagnosed as autistic, it's just like, does that really take away from the harm of your message of like, she has
Yeah.
magical powers?
But even if she is autistic, she's definitely not far enough into her journey to be understanding it fully.
Yeah.
And so yeah, that movie, it was still harmful. It was based on like stereotypes, and the way that it was represented was really gross. Like even if you just look it up and look at the one of the photos where Maddie's eyes are like rolled up.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I had the absolute pleasure, quote unquote pleasure, of watching that film, and it was very fun to roast it because it's just such a good essay piece for me to get mad about because I'm just like, I have all this pent up rage about my representation of a community that I'm a part of. Like,
Yeah, and I mean another one is like I know that there were things that were done with The Good Doctor that probably weren't as good as they should have been,
yeah.
but I really liked it. I related so much to some of it. So it's kind of hard. Like, do I think that they should have had more involvement from autistic people? Yes. Did I relate to him? Also, yes.
Yeah. I mean, even with Atypical and that TV show, even though they brought in autistic people as like the support group and like they had that environment there, I was just like, I'm T, but like I thought that the mum could have been late diagnosed. I was thinking that the second that
Also, the daughter.
oh the daughter, yes. Oh my gosh.
I thought with Atypical, they did a fairly good job at explaining some of the social difficulties or
Mm,
challenges that autistic people might come across, or like relationships is what I meant, sorry.
yeah.
But then like some of the autistic traits again were leaning more towards the stereotypical side. But I thought it was helpful in explaining some of the challenges.
Yeah. I mean, even when it came to Casey,
Yeah.
calling out Paige on being like, is my brother a project to you to try and fix? And I was just like, thank you, pop off, Queen. Thank you for interrogating that because too often, if I make friends, they will try to turn me into carbon copies of them, if that kind of makes sense, because of the way in which females are socialized and that kind of thing. And there's this inherent assumption that your friends are, because of like copying and masking and all that stuff. And it's just, thank you for that show to at least trying to crack that open just a little bit, that little bit of interrogation being like, friendships can exist and you think that you're friends with them until they do questionable things, and it's just a whole other ordeal that is not really talked about often in media because the representation of female disability is seen as like an object of fetishization. It's not really humanized as much as it should be in comparison to like refractions with neurotypical people.
Yeah.
Like there's always some kind of neurotypical refraction to compare the disabled person to, and I'm just like, bro, I don't have any kooky people to compare myself to. I just have my cat. It's just really interesting that I hope that in the future with more, forgiving media environments, I hope that we will be able to continue forth with getting more positive representations of disability with like Chloe and the steps forward she's making and you and everyone else that continues to work towards a more inclusive representations of female disability. Are there any specific organizations, any initiatives, support groups that you'd recommend for individuals seeking additional resources or mentorship with like female disability or autism, either way, advocacy, that kind of stuff?
I mean, this is probably biased because I work for Autism New Zealand. It's a good place to ask questions if you need advice on something or if you want some information on something. Where else? Embrace Autism online. I really like that one. They have a lot of blogs as well. You can look up different topics and get information there. I'm not really sure about the rest. It's kind of hard to find information and support, especially for adults and females. There are a lot of really good TikToks on autism. Definitely like some fun jokes.
I love Paige Dale and Chloe's TikToks as well. I mean, that's when I first found out about her before Heartbreak High. And I was just like, Heartbreak High happened. And I was just like, ooh, book. So then I sat and read the book. And ever since then, I've been trying to spam her on Instagram. And so for the future, looking ahead, where do you see the future of disability representation about females going in media? Like, what do you hope for in the future for people that, you know, may think that they're or see elements of themselves in the characters?
I think the biggest thing I'd like to see is a better understanding of different disabilities, not just an awareness that they exist, an understanding of what they mean, and better training for mental health professionals. Honestly, I have seen so many psychologists and psychiatrists, and they were all very dismissive of autism or ADHD, or like they saw it as a bad thing. They tried to prevent me from getting assessed. Yeah, they had decided I had borderline personality disorder, even though I'd never been assessed. And they were trying to prevent me from getting assessed for autism. And then when I got diagnosed as autistic, they tried to get rid of my diagnosis. It was a big mess. Yeah, they didn't like it at all. They didn't want me to have that diagnosis, even though it literally saved my life. So yeah, better knowledge around that. I also think I'd like to see some more updates to the diagnostic criteria, given that they're based on little boys. Yeah, and I think I want to see more support for disabled people. I think if, in an ideal world, if everyone was accommodated well, we wouldn't necessarily need more individual or like specific support is what I meant.
Yeah.
But that's not where we're at. It's going to be really hard to get to a place where we have sufficient accommodations in general in society. So having mentoring or connecting autistic people or families of autistic people with autistic adults is helpful. Yeah, I think I'd like to see more families being given more positive information, because they're often given all that deficit, negative stuff, and then connected with other neurotypical people instead of being connected with autistic people. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I was told too that multiple times throughout my life that I was too smart to be anything, and I'm just like,
oh, I've had that. I've been told I was too intelligent to be autistic, or one was I'm too intelligent to take things literally. Yeah.
Oh, that fills me with rage. Yeah. My rage is having its day right now in music and pop culture, and I'm just here for it. I'm like, yes, pop off. Go ahead and tell the world how you're feeling. I mean, even I just love that your book is being used as a resource, because the amount of people that I've been like, hey, because they've said to me, and I've been like, you should read this book. This,
yeah,
you know, free sales on your part, but no.
Yeah, it's been quite fun, because I mean, after fighting so much with the mental health services, who spent a year trying to get rid of my diagnosis, having mental health professionals recommend my books was the biggest FU to the professional system I wasn't.
Yes, I love that. I don't know. It's just such a good like coffee table book for all my friends that like borderline. And I'm just like, you could be, but maybe we should draw in this little book for a bit. And I'd be like, see, I told you.
Yeah.
I'm convinced there's an equivalent of a neurodivergent radar.
There is. So that was one thing as well. I got diagnosed, and I very quickly realized that almost everyone in my immediate circle was neurodivergent. They just didn't know it. So I have so many people in my life right now who are in the process of coming to terms with that or going to get assessed. I don't think I have. Do I have anyone in my life that's not? I don't think I have anyone in my life who's not neurodivergent. Maybe my manager. Yeah. It's kind of, it's funny. Someone commented on one of my posts that I made, and they called it the spectrum. So I love that.
That too. I'm just going to start using that. I have so many quotes I'm just going to pull from you today and start unironically using them. Talking about things that matter to me just makes me overly passionate and over the top. But that's just the way that I tend to react most of the time. Okay, sweet. Thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
All good. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Seeing Me on the Screen. We hope you found our discussion insightful and thought-provoking. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our podcast on Spotify for more engaging discussions about female disability in movies, TV shows, theatre and beyond. Remember that your voice matters. Email us at seeingmeonthescreenpod@gmail.com with any guest or topic suggestions. Thank you again for listening to Seeing Me on the Screen. Until next time, let's keep sharing untold stories and work towards a world where everyone can see themselves represented on the screen.